Second half. The first story in the second half and the sixth of our evening is The Ghastly Rolling by Simon Piney. Simon is a retired counselling psychotherapist who has lived in Stroud for nearly 30 years. He is a published poet. Now in his 70s, Simon still writes fiction every day, as he has since he was 6, only to be distracted by housework, gardening, writing poetry and meditation. He hosts Stroud Inklings, a writing group for first-time novelists. Please welcome to the stage, with as much gusto as you have, reading The Ghastly Rolling, Simon Piney.
That's for a taller person than me. You asked me for an eerie story. Well, I can tell you all one which I know to be true, because it happened to me, and it still haunts my dreams so many years later. I warn you, it's not a pleasant tale, nor has it a neat and tidy ending which explains all away. It began many years ago when I was young and foolish. It had been a hot day in May, and I had spent a bibulous evening with some other young bloods at a hostelry in Cranham Woods. In those far-off days, pubs closed their doors at 11 o'clock, and some minutes after the hour, we found ourselves outside in the fine spring night. It had been our intention to take part in the next day's cheese rolling event, which has taken place since time immemorial at Cooper's Hill. I had decided, the weather being so clement, that I would sleep that night under the stars. But much to my astonishment, none of my companions was disposed to accompany me. Indeed, they seemed bent on dissuading me from my endeavour. Emboldened by many a pint of local ale, I left them to make their way home, while I struck out towards Moor End and Prinish, cutting up the wooded slopes. The walk was pleasant. The moon was full. I was carrying no more than my bedroll, and my heart was light. In no time at all, or so it seemed to me, I reached the heights and entered Brockworth Wood, where I had planned to find a favourable spot to sleep for a few hours, it now being around midnight. Hardly had I unrolled my sleeping bag under a tall tree, and I heard the sound of music. It came, piping and drumming, from the direction of Cooper's Hill itself, and through the trees I caught a glimpse of a bonfire. Aha, thought I, others have gathered to celebrate the rolling. Perhaps they will let me join them round the fire. Indeed, the air had taken on a distinct chill, or perhaps the alcohol that I had imbibed had cooled in my blood. Taking my makeshift bed, I wound my way between the trees and up the slope. Before ever I emerged from the wood onto the open grassy top that crowns the hill, I was astonished to see, around the fire, a crowd of what I took to be men and women in fancy dress. Here were Roman soldiers, there Saxon peasants, doublets and hose, stovepipe hats, even a few monks in habit and hooded. Every age of Britain's long history was represented. All were bedaubed and streaked with dark stains, which as the figures moved nearer the fire, I saw all too clearly was the vermilion of blood. In their midst, and kneeling, bound hand and foot and blindfolded, was an enormously fat man. He was stripped to a loincloth, and his head appeared to have been shaved and polished to a high gloss, reflecting the dancing flames. All the while, the piping and drumming grew louder and more frantic. I stood, rooted to the spot, gripped by a terror I could not explain, as the strangely dressed crowd pressed on either side, nearer and nearer the obese and sweat-stained man. As if at a sudden signal, the music stopped. Silence fell. All the figures turned to look beyond the bonfire, and as one, fell to their knees. There, to my horror, rose beyond the flames what seemed to be the figure of a monstrous toad, all warts and glistening slime. Its eyes glowed red, and its maw opened to emit a foul croak. At the sound, one of the Romans, a centurion, rose to his feet and stepped forward. At a second eldritch croak from the horrid creature behind the fire, he drew his sword, and with one stupendous blow cut the prisoned man's head clean off his body. At this, the crowd set up a low and rhythmic chant. The centurion bent and picked up the dripping head, blood running down onto his breastplate. Swinging back his arm, he sent the grisly object down the hill, leaving a trail of blood and tattered flesh behind it as it rolled. The assembled crowd now began to run after the head, whooping and shrieking, while the toad croaked its obscene encouragement. As the crowd began to tumble down the hill, my worst moment was still to come. The toad turned and looked straight at me where I stood. It crouched, and as it sprang over the dying flames, it opened its jaws to reveal row upon row of sharp teeth, dripping with blood and scraps of flesh. The stench of its fetid breath overcame me, and I fell, senseless, to the ground. How long I lay in a swoon I cannot tell, but I woke to bright sunlight and the sounds of cheering. Fearing the return of the blood-masked crew, I lay still and peered through the undergrowth. No bonfire met my eyes, only a crowd of people tossing a cheese-like ball down the steep slope. It was the start of the annual rolling. No sign remained of the gory horror I had witnessed. There is little more to tell. I got home as fast as I could, shaking and trembling. I lay on my bed in a fever for a fortnight. To this day, I cannot pass along the road from Painswick to Cheltenham without a shudder, nor are my nights always quiet. So, ask me no more. My tale is told, and such stories are unfit for dark nights. But, listen. Isn't that the sound of a rattling drum and a foul piping? Can you not hear a ghostly croaking borne on our dark Cotswold night winds?